Good morning, everybody. I'd just like to talk about the gas industry in some general terms. I know the commissioners have talked about the details of what it's meant to them. A couple of things that have already been mentioned. First of all, I guess I should say, I share a lot of this area with Senator Baker. My understanding, Senator Baker's son is getting married today, so that's the only reason I'm sure that she's not here. So, in any event, the DRBC was mentioned. Senator Baker and I have joined on every time we get a chance to take on the DRBC or say something. She sponsored legislation that says that this is a taking. We'll see where that goes. I have joined in lawsuits against the DRBC as the chairman of the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee, but we're working on it. I think it's egregious what that organization has done to part of Pennsylvania, and it's controlled by people that aren't from Pennsylvania, frankly, and that's part of the problem. The PIPE program was mentioned. I guess I'll do a personal editorial. The PIPE program was a bill that I had introduced, I forget how many years ago, and it was the purpose of it. It's really gratifying to hear that it's working like it was intended, and that is to extend natural gas lines and to make the production gas more available to Pennsylvanians. Almost 50% of Pennsylvania households don't have access to natural gas. We're one of the largest producers. We're the second largest producer in the United States. That makes us one of the largest producers in the world. And half of our residents don't have access to natural gas. That makes no sense to me at all. The PIPE program, I'll give you a little bit of background. We had to look around for money to fund it. We found some money in some green building programs that had been sitting there for 15 years and nobody bothered to access it. So that's where the first, I think, $15 or $20 million came from, and we did the same thing most recently to kind of replenish it. But it has worked really well. Maybe we can put more money in it, and hopefully that will help get gas to more people. The gas industry, just think about this. That industry came to Pennsylvania. They didn't ask for anything. If you remember, Pennsylvania was trying to get Amazon, right? We were trying to get Amazon to come to either Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. We supposedly, the legislature really was not privy to all the details that the governor had worked out, but supposedly with Amazon, there were billions of dollars offered to Amazon through tax breaks of all sort to get them to come here. And obviously they didn't come. What have we done to the gas industry, or what have we offered the gas industry? Nothing. Yeah, maybe a hard time in some respects. So I mean that means a lot. I think, and it's something that's overlooked. I don't care. Yeah, look, am I saying that the gas industry is perfect in everything that they do? Of course not. There is no industry of this size that moves anywhere that doesn't have a few glitches. I mean, I'm not that naive, but it has worked out extremely well, in my opinion. Since 2012, when the impact fee legislation was signed by Governor Corbett, actually it was on Valentine's Day, February 14th, we have distributed about somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.4, $1.5 billion. That's all come back. Now, what's really interesting is, you've already heard, Susquehanna County is the largest producer in Pennsylvania. We have gotten to the point where my understanding is, there are a few more holes being drilled in the southwest. They're drilling more holes, but their holes aren't not as productive as ours. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that's kind of the difference. The money that's distributed through the impact fee, the kind of the neat thing about it, I guess the legislature, we did something right. There's no grant process. You don't have to file an application. You don't have to go to your legislator and get it approved. You don't have to do anything. There's a formula. The money goes through the PUC. They apply the formula. The checks are cut and sent out. I mean, that's kind of an amazing way for government to work, at least in my opinion it is. You've heard a lot of the comment, we're the only major gas producing state that doesn't have a severance tax. Well, we are the only major gas producing state that has an impact fee. Now, you know, yesterday I had an event in Bradford County and with it was a farm related event. We invite FFA students to come to that, and there was one FFA student, probably a 9th or 10th grader, stood up and he said, we had been talking about stream cleaning, doing all kinds of things like that, what we need to do to help with the Chesapeake Bay. And he stood up and he said, why don't you just tax the gas companies? And I looked at him and I said, and I explained about the 1.4 billion that have been distributed and all this and everything and how much money had come back to Bradford County. I like close to $100 million, I think. And he said, well, that's not what my teacher said. I mean, it's just that things are not, you know, really being put out there in a fair way. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that our impact fee brings in more money than the severance taxes in Arkansas, Colorado, Ohio, and West Virginia combined. So just think about that. So what? It's called a different name. It's still a tax, and it's still we get the money. Renewable energy. You hear about renewable energy, and I can't help. Every time I come, if for me to get to my district, which is the western half of Susquehanna County, I have to drive through 5 counties, and of course I come through this area and I see the windmills. Well, are you going to participate in the strike this afternoon? You know, the what is it? Strike for climate change, climate or whatever, and there's ads on television. They're asking people to, students especially, to get up and walk out of classes and all that stuff. Anyway, okay. Let me talk a little bit about renewable energy. It's one of my favorites. You know, you hear the thing all the time, freedom is not free. I think the same thing applies to renewable energy. It's not free. Where do windmills come from? They just appear? Every windmill that's out there is 900 tons of steel, 2,500 tons of concrete, 43 tons of plastic. Where does it come from? I mean, somebody's got to make it. Solar panels. Solar panels, who makes these things? What's in solar panels? Batteries, car batteries. The car batteries, for electric cars, each one weighs about 1,000 pounds. Where in the hell does this stuff come from? It just doesn't appear. My suggestion we're going to do a lot of mining, is what we're going to do. Cobalt is necessary to make batteries as well as lithium. You know where the primary source of cobalt is? The Republic of Congo. And we know that the Republic of Congo meets every environmental standard in the world. They have great things. They've got the highest pay scales. Environmentally, we couldn't ask for anything better. And guess where it's all processed? 90% of it's processed in China. So, when you say this stuff is free, my recommendation to you is you should all buy Caterpillar stock, because there's going to be a hell of a lot of digging. Anyway, so, that one of the things from my perspective as chairman of the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee that I am really worried about, How do we recycle this stuff? We had a hearing in Harrisburg, and one of the issues that came up during this hearing was how long solar panels last. The advocates for the industry said, oh, they'll last 30 to 35 years. I thought it was really interesting. The Environmental Defense Fund, who I probably don't see eye to eye with very often, said maximum 15 years. And then how do we recycle this stuff? There's some nasty things in solar panels. From my perspective, what do we do in Pennsylvania? How do we recycle these things? That's just a question that's out there. So, I mean, when I said the whole thing about it's not free, it's not. And what amazes me is people don't think any farther ahead. It's like, okay, what do we have to do? For every windmill, I think it takes 250 tons of mining somewhere in order to produce what's needed to build a windmill. You know, maybe it's okay and maybe they're necessary, but then let's be realistic about it. And that's the one thing I don't think that people are. I read an article the other day, and it said, you know, the failure to recognize the gas industry and its importance and in the whole climate change scheme and emissions and everything else, it's like for those people who say we don't want anything to do with the gas industry, we want nothing to do with fracking, it's bad. That's like saying the house is burning and we could put it out with water, but we're not going to put water on the fire because it might cause water damage inside. It makes no sense to not embrace the gas industry, which we've done here, and look at the benefit. I don't know how many of you know people from like the southeastern part of the state or any of the places like that. Every time I invite them, I manage to get them to come north of Interstate 80, which sometimes is not difficult to do. I tell them, look for what you don't see, because there are an awful lot of people that have the feeling and the belief that anywhere the gas industry is doing business, everything is desolate, it's brown, and there are a few scraggly trees sticking up. I'm telling you, that's, and I tell them all the time, look for what you don't see. So the industry has come here. I think it's been a great plus. I think that Act 13 is probably the greatest piece of legislation in the past 100 years for rural Pennsylvania. There's just no question about it. And people here have really taken advantage of it. And when I hear things that like are happening in Susquehanna County with it and the use of it, that's exactly what we intended.